I think that this is like beautiful and wonderfully human, and I think you should stick around to hear about why, especially if you, like a lot of the media coverage on this story, have a different opinion on that. And if by the end of this, you and I still aren't on the same page, that's okay. I've been having this conversation long enough to understand that there are, a good handful of people who are just not going to agree with me on this. If you're new here, hi, my name's Kaiju Chaos. I'm an artist, and a non-insignificant portion of my life has been spent studying art history. And we're gonna have a little art history lesson right now. Strapped in. Pretty much for as long as humans have existed, we have been leaving our marks in and around the places that we live in some form or another. Like some of the oldest parietal art, like cave paintings and stuff, is, between 40 and 60,000 years old. We're talking like geometric shapes, like hand stamps and stuff like that. But Kaiju, that's not real graffiti. I know, it's sort of in the contemporary sense, you are sort of correct there. The exact factors that make an etching on a wall or a painting or something like that graffiti, it's kind of hard to nail down throughout history, but you know it when you see it, right? Like, how about in ancient Greece, right? When people would like write their names on public walls to like brag about their sexual encounters in the area. Or like how about the Temple of Poseidon at Cape Sunion, where like Lord Byron of all people carved his name? Or how about soldiers during World War I, like etching their names into the tunnels under the battlefields in France? By the time the 1960s roll around, and what we think of as modern graffiti as being born in Philadelphia, the precedent has sort of been like well and truly set, right? People want to write their names in and around the places that they live and have been. It's obviously pretty hard to definitively say where modern graffiti was born, but it's fairly well accepted that in, Philadelphia in the late 60s, this junior hire named Cornbread had a crush on a girl named Cynthia. It's sort of a long story, obviously, but he gained some notoriety, and then he got a little bit more attention after he tagged an elephant at the Philadelphia Zoo with his name, to remind people that he was still alive, because there was some public confusion about the matter at the time. Anyway, modern graffiti starts really taking off in New York a couple of years later. Famously in the Washington Heights area, this Greek-American kid named Demetrius starts tagging his name and street address all over town. So Taki 183 is his tag, right? There's this old article from, I think, the New York Times. I'll try and find it and put it here somewhere. Basically, it was about how he was writing his name everywhere and people were starting to write theirs back to him. But the article, obviously, just kind of like the coverage you're seeing right now about the LA high-rise, kind of immediately pivots to the monetary aspect of how much it's going to cost to like clean this up. I did go find it so that I could pull this quote. I work, I pay taxes too, and it doesn't harm anybody. And then he says, why do they go after the little guy? Why not the campaign organizations that put stickers all over the subways at election time? And honestly, fair. Tagging your name around town is like a concept that is really taking off. But obviously, it's easier to get caught if you are using your name and your street address as your tag, right? So there's an influx in like monikers being used, nicknames, at least in the New York scene at this time, right? It is a shift away from like the name number format into sort of the, single name share, right? Madonna. So the word tag these days typically refers to like a really quick sort of signature style thing. It's your name, right? But it's also the way that you write your name. It's usually one color, it's two-dimensional, and it's fast. When I was first learning graffiti, the person teaching me said, if it takes more than about 10 seconds to throw your tag on a wall, you're doing it wrong. Simplify it, practice a lot more, or just change your name. Like a throw up, or like a throwy, right? It's a thing that you throw onto a wall kind of quickly, but it's like a little more effort than your tag. Usually this is it's like bubble letters, right? Because they're really easy and quick to like make big shapes with, and often you'll find that there's like a secondary color, and they're big, but they're still really fast, right? I'm talking like 1.5, 2 minutes, if you're pushing it, maybe 3. The point is to get in and drop something big and unmissable and then get out. So then when I say like pieces, I'm talking about something that's like a little more elaborate. For me, usually it starts in a black book, right? Maybe you sort of like refine an idea for a few days, a few weeks, sort of on and off, until you like kind of just find the right moment to put it somewhere. Pieces are for, showing off and like putting everything you have into one piece, like multiple colors to contend with, right? Like backgrounds, effects, right? Like maybe sometimes like a character, the works. Pieces, like your tag, like your throwy, are usually just your name again. And usually, I mean, it's kind of customary to like sign your piece with your tag somewhere in like one of the corners. Sometimes, you know, if you're like me, you have a friend or two that you're kind of working alongside. You swap and you go put your tag like somewhere next to their piece just to be like, yeah, retweet. I'm here too. It's communal in that way. So armed with this knowledge, right, let's go back to the LA high rise and let's talk about the graffiti there. I think that a lot of these are in the sort of like piece caliber. Some of them clearly took more time, but in all the ones that at least that I have seen, right, have this one thing in common. They are names, largely of local artists, right, like members of the LA community. The same LA community where on any given night, an estimated 75,000 people don't have a place to call home. In the same city where for the last few years, the skyline has featured 3 unfinished billion-dollar towers that would have been luxury apartments that the vast majority of people around there couldn't afford. And all of that is maybe a separate conversation, a very important one, but one that I'm maybe not terribly qualified to speak on. But what I do know is this. There are currently 27 floors of the skyline of LA covered in tags and pieces. One of the artists that was interviewed in one of the articles that I read yesterday, he said, this building has needed love for years. And I keep thinking about that particular phrasing, like needed love. And I agree with that, right? Like I think that if I was forced to look at sort of an unfinished billion-dollar construction project in my hometown for the last 3, almost 4 years now, I'd wish that I didn't have to, especially if I knew that, you know, over 40 separate lawsuits were filed by subcontractors in my community who are still owed more than $100 million. I would want that giant unfinished eyesore to say like, we were here too, and this thing is a joke. If I'm honest with myself, right, I think that that's why I got into graffiti as a teenager in the first place. Like the idea of like forcing passersby and commuters and like my fellow Portlandians to like see me in a way that I had really wanted to be seen at the time, right? Like, you know, like outside of school or my job or like whatever, right? Just putting an unignorable piece out into the world and calling it me. That idea is so powerful. There's something inside humans that fundamentally compels us to attempt to like leave our mark on the world around us, right? To prove that we were something in the grand scheme. And buried somewhere in that human instinct, right, is the reason that like all of this, like this platform, like social media as a whole works. Our deep-seated human need to find community, right, to belong and to matter to people is just, it's constantly begging for an outlet, right? Maybe it isn't in you. Maybe I'm not as well adjusted as I hope, right? But for me, for years, graffiti was that outlet. And I obviously, I can't claim to speak to the exact motivations of these particular artists at this particular time in this particular location, right? But as with all things, we project a bit of ourselves onto the situation to make some sense of it. And for me, I look at these buildings and I think, wow, they were here. They mattered. So look, I get it. If you've never thought to like question any of this, or if you haven't been exposed to the larger culture of graffiti or its place in art history, right? Like I probably sound fully off the rails on this one. But I would challenge you that whenever you hear this story being reported on for the next couple of weeks, right? I hope that you'll take a beat and really think about it. Like think about what would motivate someone to make this, right? To see this, you know, maybe not as you've been taught to, you know, as a criminal act, as defacement, as ugly, right? But see it as floor after floor after floor of real human people standing at the highest point they could get to in the city and just screaming their name to remind you they were here.